Hello there, and welcome to the Second Life Book Club. My name is Draxtor Dupre. Today's guest is Annaliese Avery. The Nightsilver Promise is her debut novel, and she already followed that up with the Doomfire Secret. I wasn't even aware of this just a few weeks ago. Her books are young adult steampunk. I guess I we need to verify this with her if this is in fact steampunk. It has dragons, a lot of dragons. There's also flying vehicles and a lot of steam. So I figured, okay, maybe this is dragon punk, steampunk. I don't know. We'll figure this out. So today, Isabel Sharon has created a fitting space for today. So we're starting here in this little landing area. And since we are also an educational program, not only just books, um, fiction books and all that kind of stuff, I want to bring people's attention to the orrery because I learned something in preparation for the day. I now know what an orrery is. An orrery is basically a model of the solar system kind of as a clockwork. So I'm standing in front of one that I found on the Second Life marketplace. And here's a bunch of dragon stuff. There's the first aid kit for dragons and such. And here's of course in the corner my Draxtor reading dragon to get us in the mood of the setting of the Nightsilver Promise. Let's go over to where oops, and I just fell through the ground because apparently there is no there is no ground. And I was just telling our guests usually fall through the ground, not me. Oh my God. So I will be back up um, in a spiffy. Um, Now I need to find out where are we actually? Can somebody please teleport me? Oh boy, this is what I had nightmares about, that I would be the one falling down on my own show. Here I am. I don't know where the camera is, but let me just show people real quick. Right here. So careful, Poliana. Don't walk over this thing because otherwise you'll fall down. But anyways, so if the camera gets a shot from the outside here, I just want to show this real quick because the book is takes place in the real world, but in this sort of alternate steampunkish reality. And the cool thing, one of the cool things of the setting is that there are floating parts of cities. So actual neighborhoods of cities, Kensington, for example, Kensington neighborhood is a floating borough. And so, we didn't build an entire city, but we have this little floating device. Although after I found it, I found out that there's an entire snow globe with an entire city in it. Here's a telescope. And the telescope is pointed towards a little comet, which is also taking place in the book because there's a comet coming towards Earth, and the comet is believed by some in this book to be a dragon. There is a very strong theme of this is arguably the main theme of religion versus science. There are a lot of people who believe in the power of dragons and they believe in destiny. They're not big fans of free will. There are two heroes, two young people, a 14-year-old girl and a 10-year-old boy, and they do their own thing. Their mother is a scientist and she believes in the comet. She believes in science, and a fundamentalist part of this religious part of the governing body um, is very much anti-science and wants to bring back dragons. So this is a little convoluted in my language. I think Annalise will probably clear this up. Let me sit down. Welcome, Annalise Avery, to the Second Life Book Club.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I've been loitering in the background of Second Life Book Club for a few months now.
Yes, yes, you teleported in and you teleported in on people's heads, and but you never accomplished what I just accomplished, which is fall down from walking into my own venue. Now, I What about that, Annalise? Who is the newbie? Who is the newbie today? Isn't that amazing?
I'm just glad that I'm sitting in the seat and I don't intend on moving very far from it. So
But you have roller skates on.
I
You should
do.
be roller
I
skating.
love these roller skates. They're amazing. And uh, Drax showed me a wonderful roller skating rink that
Yeah.
actually, whenever I log into Second Life, that's where I manifest is in the roller skating rink. And it's usually just me there. I have a little skate round by myself, fall over, no one's there to see. It's quite nice.
This is maybe actually pretty good that it's that's like a maybe not so popular spot. You would otherwise maybe feel a little so self-conscious. Sometimes SL is actually a place to um, find some solitude. I mean, this is I actually find fascinating that a lot of people use it to be alone and contemplate and reflect rather than be with a whole bunch of dragons, which we are right now. Okay, before we start the conversation, camera, please cam around in here because we have an amazing audience that is extremely diverse. It's always diverse, but we have so many dragons here today. We have a dragon by the name of Verpackungsservice. He might be German. It's just a wild guess. Um, but a lot of people have also these wonderful little dragons on their shoulders, and we have Shyla the super dragon. We have the panthers are they're furry dragons. I don't know. Maybe you want to put it in local chat what you are, but this is so wonderfully diverse. It's just
It's brilliant.
yeah. Now, in your book, which is so much fun. Great characters and really the setting, this the tension between the the this very regimented society of okay, here's your track, you're gonna do that. A very classist society, a very sort of German, like you're gonna learn that job and you're gonna do that for the rest of your life. And also dragons and so on and so forth. But dragons are actually real. But there's a part of like the um the religious. So there's a kind of a quote unquote normal acceptance of religion or the belief in the dragons, and then there's a very fundamentalist kind of section of it, right? They want the dragons to come back and take over, or
Yeah, so shall I kind of like set the world with that
maybe
might be good for our audience
that might
to
be good because I'm not able to do it.
okay. I've done it a few times, so
I am the worst world setter, Annalise, and thank you. You please set the world.
So basically, the Nightsilver Promise is set in a world that is quite similar to our own in some regards, and then fundamentally quite different in other respects. As Drax has said, there is this overarching idea that the whole entire universe is made out of clockwork, and that everybody has their track in life, just as the stars have their track through the celestial mechanism and all of the planets. And the celestial mechanism is thought to have been created by the chief designer. And the chief designer used dragons and the breath of dragons, particularly, in order to create the unseen metals of the tracks of the celestial mechanism. So that's one of the reasons why dragons are so important. But it's believed that the dragons, especially the mother dragon Anu, who helped the chief designer to create the celestial mechanism, that she saw that there were problems with the idea of everybody having their track and being quite fixed in life and not having any free will. So she set into motion the unseen unfolding, um, mechanisms within the mechanism that would unravel and see the demise of the chief designer.
Hmm.
So everybody in the celestial mechanism, wherever the stars are at the moment of their birth, that tells them what their destiny is. And our main character, Pacey Fitzwilliam, she is 14 and she hasn't received her destiny. Most people receive their destiny when they're infants, when they're quite little. And they go to the Mechanist Chapel and they have a special coin that they put into a machine, and their track is tattooed on their wrist for everyone to see.
Hmm.
And at the beginning of the book, Paisley receives her track, I'm going to do a reading in a little while from the beginning, so I won't spoil it for you, but I will
Right,
tell you.
and this is what I was careful about talking, because I didn't want to spoil the the sort of world design in that sense. I mean, I don't think you spoiled it, but the chief designer, since we're there, the chief designer, which is, to me, I read this as, God or intelligent design. Does the chief designer, do we find out who the chief designer is?
And not in book one, and not in book
Ooh.
two.
Oh, so there's a third one.
Yes.
Is it always 3 books?
Um, so originally, the Nightsilver Promise was a one book, just a standalone,
Mhm,
and I worked with um, a wonderful writing academy called the Golden Egg Academy, and I was speaking to. As part of the Golden Egg Academy, you get an editor to help you. This is like before you get published, before you find an agent.
mhm.
And so I was talking to the very lovely Imogen Cooper, who runs the Golden Egg Academy, and she just turned around and said to me, "Oh no, Annalise, this needs to be 3 books." Um, so I took. I mean, admittedly, it was like 140,000 words at that point. So I took some of those words and stretched them over a longer arc. Um,
This is really well constructed. This is so well constructed, and it's interesting because, I explained this in other shows before, how we do it, because the preparation for this particular show is that I read the work, and then I kind of form some my opinion what the author might be, and trying to discover the author through the work. And Shyla, the super dragon gecko, and Monkey, they both then look a little bit what else is out there about the author, maybe an interview or so. And apparently, you said in a previous interview that you consider yourself more of a pantser than a plotter. Now, I think we now know, people do know what that means, I guess. Flying by the seats of your pants, you just starting somewhere and then figuring out where you go as you go along. Versus a planner, you kind of map out everything, you have the ending, and then you kind of fill in the middle,
yeah.
and so on and so forth. But you think a pantser. What I found is that this is so well constructed, this book, and it's surprising that you consider yourself a pantser.
Yeah, I think because so I have quite a process that when I speak to other authors, it slightly terrifies them, my writing process. But basically, I world build a bit as if I'm creating a whole new solar system. So when a solar system is formed, you have a protostar, which is like the initial idea of the story. That it's,
Hmm.
sometimes it's a tone, sometimes it's an image that I've got, sometimes it's a character, and then when a solar system is forming, you have a thing called the Protoplanetary Disk, which is basically all of the debris that gets blown off from the formation of the star, and those granules, those tiny atoms, they start to come together and to form planetismals. And it's a bit like making a snowball. As it rolls around, the planetismals bash into each other and they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's kind of how I make a story. I collect ideas and I put them together in my writing journal, and the ideas get bigger and bigger, and they find like-minded ideas and they collect together until they're big enough to for me to start writing.
Mm.
And once they're big enough for me to start writing, once they can, you know, sustain their own gravity, um, they've achieved hydrostatic equilibrium, then
Everything that you add, you like to live among planets and use those types of comparisons and metaphors quite often, I gather.
yeah, I think it's quite interesting, you know, the way that things evolve. So the way that obviously planets evolve is very similar to the way that I evolve stories. Then the story starts to evolve like a planet, and life springs up, and it takes on its own form, and its own motion.
I-
So I tend to write a whole first draft with, sometimes I'll know a few key scenes, and Sometimes I'll just have like a notion of where I'm going, but I don't ever kind of constrict myself on how to get there. I let my characters do a lot of that. And then once I've finished writing what I like to call my draft zero or my dirty zero draft, I'll
Hmm.
then throw it away and start again on an actual first draft because I've what I've done in that first draft, which is usually really, really long, is I've taught myself the shape of the story. So I now know the shape of it and I'll read it through and then I'll put it to one side. And at that point, I like to think of my brain as a kind of sieve. And I know that some authors, when they're editing their work, they get really hung up on killing their darlings
Right.
and like, oh my God, I've written such a beautiful sentence. I couldn't possibly cut it. Whereas if I've thrown the whole lot away, I don't have to worry about one or two sentences that I might hold
That
on to.
is fascinating. So you give birth to people, you kill them, you give birth again, you kill them.
Yes. And I think in a way, um, I wouldn't say it stops me getting attached to them, but it stops me getting attached to those particular versions of them and those particular
Right.
words. And as I'm so when I do my first draft, the characters become deeper, they become richer because they've lived that previous life experience. They're now living an additional life with all of that that they've brought with them. And my brain has become a story sieve. All of the things that were not important to the character, all of the things that were not important to the story has fallen through the little holes in the sieve and been discarded. I don't have to worry about it. But all of the things that are integral to the world, to the story, to the characters, they have
They
stayed in the
stay.
sieve.
Mm.
Um, and that's what I take forward.
This is really wonderful. Actually, I put people saw this behind us is this big board, and then there's the slide with your quote. What I usually do is when I have the first draft, I throw it away and then start writing again from scratch. So the way you explain it, this is incredibly inspiring, actually. I tend to do something similar with the videos, but the way you explain it, I hope that this is great food for thought. Now, we do wanna get a taste of the reading. Um, and so maybe we should read. I'm looking at my notes here because we're going to be jumping back and forth here with the plot and with what the
Yeah.
book is about, but also the process, which I find so fascinating to get illuminated a little bit. Um, I want to ask one before we read. Now, the dragons are put away. They're banned. Um, in book one. They're put behind a veil, or they disappear to the north somewhere.
Yeah,
Um,
so there are
but
two
why?
things.
Were they threatening the world or?
Well, there are two things happening with the dragons. So there used to be great dragons in the world,
Hmm.
but the great dragons were very powerful and were linked to the dragon walkers, which we will talk about later. And there was the first George. So in where Paisley lives in Albion, the Empire of Albion, um, there was once upon a time a guy called George who decided that dragons were not fun, a
Hmm.
bit like St. George, and decided that he was going to eradicate them all from. It was in his stars to eradicate um, all of the dragons from the world. And every George that is selected to rule over Albion is chosen from their stars rather than because of who their parents are.
Hmm.
So
Very democratic environment. Okay.
yeah,
Almost like the country you. I'm sorry. Let's not get into that. Go
so
ahead.
so the George many Georges ago, um, basically killed all of the great dragons, or not killed them, but vanquished them and sent them into the Vale. Meanwhile, there are dragons within the world still. They are still outlawed from Albion, so no dragons are allowed to set foot or claw on Albion soil.
Hmm.
But there are dragons that do exist within the world structure, and those dragons have they have a lot of diversity, just like birds
Hmm.
in our world. So you've got small little papillion dragons,
Billion
white
dragons. Yeah.
dragons,
Pygmy dragons. Yeah.
pygmy dragons, yeah, and dragons. The biggest dragons are about the size of an Icelandic pony, And they live in the northern realms where it's perfectly okay for dragons to
This
exist.
is really quite interesting because before we started the show, we had a gigantic dragon who downscaled himself. I believe he's here in the audience. His second life name is Verpackung Service, and he came in here and he was so gigantic that he was partially his body was blocking the inside of this room. And I detected him because I was climbing up on the roof, and there was his head, but his body was partially in here. So he was, this is what you're
Definitely a great
describing. I mean,
dragon.
there is a lot of different types of dragons, but we don't want to also discriminate against the big ones just because they may look menacing. Maybe they are not. There is an aspect of the dragon touch. Okay, see, I'm saying like let's read, but then I go like no, let's talk about dragon touch first. Let's do the reading. So your first excerpt here is from the beginning of the book where the main character Paisley, she's a 14-year-old girl. Her mother is a well-known scientist, and she finds out, as you were saying, fairly late in the game, what awaits her in life because everything in this world is predetermined. It's basically printed out almost on a fax machine. I was laughing. It was like, oh, okay, you'll get your printout. Here's what's going to happen for the rest of your life. And as you said, normally that happens earlier, but why do we know why Paisley? Because she's very anxious. What does life have in store for me, for my career? And it just doesn't happen. Why does it not happen for her? Why is this?
Yeah, so the mechanists who run give everybody their destiny and are on hand to
And who are
give.
these mechanists? These are the experts who study the stars, who
Yeah, so
know when it's
they
time.
study the stars and
Mhm.
they extrapolate what people's tracks are from wherever the positions of the stars are at the moment of their birth. But they're also on hand if people stray from their track. They're there to offer guidance and to help them along their way. And one of the things about the stars is that you have to wait for them to be revealed to you. So
Mm.
again, it's written in the stars when you can receive your destiny. So it's not a case that it's been withheld by anybody except for her own destiny by the chief designer, and it's just at this moment that the chief designer has decided to let Paisley know what her destiny is. So
It's never the mechanist's fault. It's just
never.
Destiny's fault. Okay, here is Annaliese Avery reading from the Nightsilver Promise.
Okay, so I'm going to read right from the beginning, from chapter 1. And Paisley has gone to the Mechanist Chapel and she is about to receive her destiny. The schematica was waiting for her on the dais. Her left wrist tingled in anticipation. Like most Mechanist machines, the schematica was elegant in its design. The slot at the top was just the right size for the copper disc, and the circular hole at the front was just the right size for her hand. Paisley could feel the rise and fall of her chest now. This was it. The cogs of fate had already turned for her, and she was about to know what her track held. Excitement jostled with fear and won out. She held her breath as she placed her left hand into the machine, palm up, and then placed the disc in the slot with her other hand. For a moment, nothing happened. And then the machine closed around Paisley's forearm, trapping her hand and wrist inside. Her breathing quickened. She felt a clamminess come all over her. Paisley's wrist began to burn. She bit her lip, and tears sprang down her cheek. But the pain subsided in a moment. The schematica opened, and Paisley tentatively pulled her hand out. She held her arm up to the light, studying the splattering of gold stars on her wrist. Paisley smiled. She finally had her track. She was just like everyone else in the Empire. But there was something strange about her stars. In all the charts that she had ever seen, the golden dots were scattered over the circle, defining its circumference, filling its surface. But her stars were scattered in a semicircle, as if it were missing its other half. From the bottom of the schematica came a long piece of parchment. It had Paisley's name typed on it in Old Celtic, and below her name was a drawing identical to the stars on her wrist. Paisley looked beyond this at the series of symbols and detailed explanations. She translated each one quickly. They told her what type of a person she was and how the cogs of her track would turn. She smiled broadly, reassured at the strange grouping of her stars, as everything she read about herself rang true. Her stars said that she was brave and loyal, that she stood by the truth and would fight for the rights of herself and others. Her stars said that she should put her needs before those of other people from time to time. Then she paused. As Pacey translated the last section of her chart, her mouth became dry. She read the lines once, twice, a third time. Her breathing came fast and her heart sounded in her ears. Fear gripped her. You will be brave. You will try your hardest. You will have far to go, but you will not have long to travel. You will suffer great losses. Your stars say that you will fail. Your stars say, Paisley Fitzwilliam, that before the end of your 14th turning, your cog will cease, your track will end, and you will die.
Ooh, and that's from the first chapter, Destiny Calling from the Nightsilver Promise. Annalise, that is awesome. Thank you. We'll read more later. Please have a seat. Um, this is so awesome. The way the book starts with this real threat of 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 death for this 14-year-old girl. So I want to ask, and there's other parts too that to me are I think pretty obviously deal with a disability in a way. I mean, her brother has something that is perceived and treated as if he had a disability sort of in the world here. He's looked at
Sorry.
I don't want to give it a I was wondering if I should give it away what he has.
I
But
think we're probably going to have to give it away. But yeah, so Dax he wears a leg brace
mhm,
on one of his legs. Um, and my granddad actually wore calipers when he was a boy. And one of the very first images that I had of when I started writing was of Paisley standing on the roof of her house, looking up at the comet. And I knew that the comet was really important, that it was something that her mother had found, and I could hear her brother Dax
mhm.
sitting on the chimney behind her, and I could hear him kicking his legs on the chimney. So there was like a thud and then a ting, and then a thud and then a ting, and I knew that he had this metal caliper on his leg, and
Wow.
so
Mm,
within the world, there are people that have dragon touch, and dragon touch is basically like a dragon-like attribute, and it's mostly women, and well, it's predominantly women and young girls that have dragon touch. And so we have summer characters that can breathe fire. We have an amazing character called Odelia, who I absolutely love, and when I grow up, I basically want to be Odelia. And she has these amazing dragon wings. There are some that have dragon claws, and Dax has a dragon leg. And
now, but this sounds incredibly cool, but it's also I mentioned disability because it's not necessarily seen always as something cool or an asset, right? I mean, if you
yeah,
have at that age, if you have a brace in the physical world, um, well, you're seen as somebody with a physical flaw, no?
yeah, yeah, and definitely for the society that Paisley lives in within the Empire of Albion, because dragons are outlawed.
Hmm.
Um, if anybody has dragon touch, they are actually sentenced to death. Um, and it's doubly dangerous for Dax, because not only does he have dragon touch, he is a boy, and there is a prophecy that a dragon touch boy will bring back the great dragons.
Hmm.
So keeping his dragon touch a secret is really important to Paisley and to her family. So
Mm.
he wears this caliper on his leg to keep it straight, to keep it hidden. um, and there's a couple of times when he takes off the brace, and we see the power of his leg, and um, and we get to see it in all of its glory, because it's actually a really big asset to him rather than
Mhm.
something that is, although it's seen by the society at large as being something that's quite dangerous.
Yeah, and that's why to me, it's a wonderful way of. I mean, you do this in so many different ways in this book, and again, we're talking about young adult, and I'm always in awe when we have authors on that work in that genre, and for that particular age group, of gently weaving into a really sort of suspenseful, exciting narrative these real issues like, can I be accepted despite me looking different physically, and can I rebel against this sort of regimented society like Paisley does? Can I question adults? And yeah, it's really well done, and it's well done without being on the nose. So uh that disability angle, I mean, now I'm thinking like, if I'm not even sure if that was intentional for you, to if you even thought about that. Maybe it's just the lens that I'm looking through, because I grew up with my mother being a special ed teacher with a lot of kids with disabilities, and the way to integrate people with physical disabilities, the kids, what my mother back in the day was like, this is your superpower, special, and you are part of this community, and this is not a flaw, this is something
Mm.
really, really cool, actually. So that was always the pedagogical approach back in the day.
Yeah, I definitely wanted it to, be shown that the characters are. I think there's one point when Paisley's talking to Dax and she says to him, "This is a part of you, but it's not
Hmm.
all of who you are.
Hmm.
You are all of the parts. You are made up of so many different parts, and this is just one part of you." And I definitely wanted to show that, uh, that there's that everything can be an asset. Everything about you can be. It's you. You can't.
Yeah,
You
it's
can't
all of
change
you.
it.
You're
It's
you're
all of you.
exactly. Yeah,
Every
yeah.
single bit.
Now, I want to bring up this author note at the end, and it's interesting that you put this author note in there, and it's at
I
the end
love
of the.
writing the author notes. They're like one of my favorite things
Yeah.
to do.
I'm putting it up. If the camera can pull back, it's right next to the tip jar. And here you write, I firmly believe that our destiny is not set in the stars as the mechanists would have you believe, but it is created by the choices that we make, both big and small. Our tracks are not made for us by the chief designer, but are forged by all the deeds that we do. Our light is not given to us, it is something we make and nurture deep within ourselves. Let it shine, protect it when you need to, and if you see it dim in another, encourage them to become brighter. One star can guide a traveler in the dark. A whole sky full will light up the night. We're all made of stardust. Now that you are, I know that you are made from the same world building energy that created the cosmos. Shine brightly and go boldly along the track of your choosing. And as you travel, light up the night. So the destiny is not determined. Well, again, I mean, tell that to the classist society that we both grew up in Germany and in the UK, and of course, here is my editorializing. The United States likes to bill itself as a classless society. I think that is not really true. But these tracks are determined by access and yeah, by.
Indeed. Yeah, I think so. I remember very keenly the moment when I realized that boys and girls were treated differently. Um,
Mhm.
so I was in junior school. I think I was about 8 or 9, and I'd had a bit of an argument with a boy at school called Jonathan Salfrey Brooks,
Oh
and we'd
boy, if he's listening to this program,
I
he's
know
gonna
he's
like.
listening. He's like, "Hang on, what's about to go down?" We'd had a physical altercation, which
Oh.
I don't condone, but and we both got put on the wall for obviously fighting and being naughty. And after about 5 minutes, the dinner lady came round and said, "Are you willing to apologise?" And I was like, "No." And she asked Jonathan if he was willing to apologize. And
Wait a minute. What has that putting to the wall? What does that mean? You're
oh,
standing.
so you had to go and stand on the like stand with your back up against the wall of the
Oh,
playground,
Jesus.
and you were not allowed to move from that spot whilst everybody else was playing or having lunch or whatever they were doing. You had to stand up the wall. So I was standing obviously with my back to the wall, and so Jonathan, he came up and he was just like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And off he went to play football and enjoy his lunch hour. And he didn't mean it. He did
Hmm.
not mean it. So 5 minutes later, the dinner lady came back and she was like, "Are you willing to apologise to Jonathan, Alice?" And I was like, "No, because if I say sorry, I won't mean it. So I do not
Mm.
intend to say sorry to Jonathan." And I stood there for the whole of lunchtime and I was told, what a naughty girl I was and how I should apologise to poor Jonathan.
This is amazing. These are the formative experience,
And
Annalise, that follows our entire lives. No, I mean, you
indeed.
really demonstrated kind of frankly, a moral backbone, I guess. Yeah.
So I think there's some of me that's still standing at that wall, refusing to apologise to any Jonathan Salvybrook out there who,
Well,
'cause
you
he was
have really internalized the name. You keep repeating that name.
yeah, the full name as well. Yeah,
Hmm.
so yeah, I think that was the moment when I was obviously very little and I realised that not everybody is treated equally and you can just say things that you don't mean and be kind of privileged by
Mm.
just because you've said a few words, that's made it okay. No, it hasn't actually. So
Now, I want to briefly put up these slides here because what an aspect that I really like about this book, and it is not always the case. Um, your chapter titles are awesome. This is just a sort of a collage that Charlotte put together. I just snapped photos of these different chapter titles, just random chapter titles. Dragon Touch, Battle and Betrayal, The Daxon Trove, The Dragon and the Machine, Destiny Calling, Dark Acts. Now, for me as a progressive rock and heavy metal fan, these is all like Ronnie James Dio. I don't know if people know who he is. Look him up. Could have used all these as like album titles,
yeah,
but
I think they're all tracks from my second album, to be honest.
yeah,
Yeah.
the treasure of knowing, the dragon in the dark, the man of the yard, the fall of Roach. This is all Claude Albany says in the local chat. I don't have to look Dio up, but but talk a little bit about these about the titles because I feel not to besmirch any other writers. I mean, some people do like one, two, three, four, five, whatever. Um, but these titles they have a punch. These chapters they make you uh interested. I mean, they're like appetizers in and of itself. Just the title of the chapter, you go like, oh, what's gonna happen there?
Yeah, and I definitely tried to pick them with so that if you go back to them after you've read that chapter, you gain a little bit of insight. So I love stories that have multiple layers to them, and I love stories that once you finish reading them, you then go back to the beginning and you read it with new insight, and you see things that you never saw before. So the chapter headers is just another one of those layers, one of those circular layers within the story. So if you go back and read the chapter header after you've read the whole chapter, you'll be like, "Oh, yes, I see how that ties in now."
Hmm.
Um, and one of the things about the second book is that after reading the Doomfire Secret, if you then go back and read the Nightsilver Promise, the insight that you've gained from both of the books allows you to approach the first book from a slightly different angle. And I've had
Hmm.
a couple of people contact me, be like, I've just reread it and I found so much more that was below the surface that I didn't realize until I had, and that is the treasure of knowing. One of the chapters is called the treasure of knowing, is that you gain this additional insight from the accumulative information that you've gained through experience and through learning, which is another thing that we all get as we grow up.
This is wow. It's very cool to get an insight into that the thinking of an author that way. This is very inspiring. People are saying here that roaches are not falling. Roaches don't die when they roaches never die. They can't fall. You'll find out what the roach is because in the reading excerpt number 2, we'll find out about roaches. Before we go to the reading, I want to ask you: Are you are a librarian or you were a librarian?
I was a librarian, so just before when I got my book deal, I was a library manager, and
Mhm.
before then, I was a librarian. So,
W- Uh, why do we need libraries? That's
well,
in the business they call that a softball question. But we live.
did you hear my sharp
y-
intake of breath then?
Yes, absolutely. Because the reason why I'm asking this, I mean, we all know that we live in a world that is so surreal, where satire is so dead, where the privatization madness has thrown us into a hellhole of consumerism. And that's not a new insight. I'm sorry. That it is pretty clear why we need libraries, but do make the case. Why do we need libraries? We
Oh,
have malls.
so libraries are so fundamentally important to society. They are so apart from the fact that libraries nowadays are not just places for you to go and gain information, and not just information that is broad, but information that is also very, very targeted to what you need. If you
Hmm.
ever need to know anything, just contact a librarian.
Yeah.
They will have the information for you. Librarians are they are the most amazing search engines in the whole entire universe. I feel that they are tapped into some kind of cosmic database that other people do not have access to. I have a lovely librarian friend. She used to work as a school librarian. She's retired now. Her name is Linda Spendlove, and children would come to Linda with their problems, and she would say, I have a book for that. And she would go
Hmm.
and get a fiction book from off the shelf that had a character that was dealing with exactly the same problem that the children were dealing with. She would medicate the children with books. Apart from the fact that libraries give access to people who cannot afford books. You know,
Yeah.
you can go to your
Yep.
library, you can borrow a book. The author receives a yearly payment from the public lending rights for that book as well. So there is absolutely no need for you to pirate a copy off the internet. Just go to your local library, and or even join your local library and download it to your device if you like to read on an e-reader. Um, I prefer a physical book myself. Borrowing books from the library is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so
Let's repeat that. Pirating, even if you're too lazy to go to the library, pirating is not the answer. The answer is signing up for ebook delivery from your library because the author actually gets paid through that.
Indeed, yes, and the wonderful thing about libraries is that they want people to take out their books. They want to give you books to read. They're amazing people, and if they don't have something in their ebook catalog, there is always a little button or a field that you can fill in and recommend that they buy something, and they mostly do. They will mostly buy it in unless it's ridiculously expensive because, as we know, libraries work on a really, really tight budget. They will do everything that they can to get that book in, and you don't have to even live in in England, we have different counties. You don't need to live in the county in order to be a member of a library service. So I live in Suffolk, but I'm
Hmm.
also a member of Norfolk Libraries because I'm kind of on the border. So
Oh.
if I go onto I listen to a lot of audiobooks whilst I'm walking. If I go onto my ebook catalogue and there is a title that I really want, but they don't have it in Suffolk Libraries, I will usually go and search the Norfolk Library and borrow it there. And I know that I think it's the New York Library has recently said that they would give library cards to anybody throughout um, America, so that people can have access to
I
books
think,
that might be
yeah.
banned in their states, which is just amazing, you know.
Actually, we put up a slide here that Shyla prepared Suffolk libraries. Here's the Gainsborough Community Library, the Framlingham
Oh,
Library.
Framlingham. I used to work
Fra-
so there's a castle in
oh,
Framlingham, and I used to work in the castle before I was a librarian.
oh,
Um,
I thought the library was in the castle. That would be cool.
the castle is actually the one that, Ed Sheeran sings about in his song.
Oh,
So
my musical taste has stopped in 1985, which was the best year of music, and then I stopped listening. But I do know who Ed Sheeran is because I saw him on Twitter about something. But no, these these libraries uh, here are are awesome. Here's the children's section, the children's library, and 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 I want to ask you, and I think I kind of know the answer, maybe because maybe with your exposure to working with kids in this setting, and I also know that you have children of your own, but I'm curious, do you have readers to check your book, your draft book, if it is working for that target audience? Like some, people have all these, whatever are they called, test readers? I don't even know.
so you sometimes you have beta readers.
Beta
So
readers. Ah, yeah.
yeah. So like I have different readers that I use for different things, for different functions. I also have sensitivity readers.
I
So
was
I
gonna
had
add, that was my follow-up, if you have sensitivity readers. Yeah.
yeah. So my children, bless them. Um
They
my
have to
son
earn their keep. Oh my God.
God no. My son my son, he read a very early version of the Nightsilver Promise when it wasn't actually even called the Nightsilver Promise. It was called the Invention of Night back then. Um, and he is adamant that one of the characters, Roach, in the book was completely different to how he was, and it doesn't
Mhm.
matter how many times I say to him that was never the case. He's like, no, that's the version I preferred, and I don't intend to ever read any of your books ever again.
Whoa.
Um,
Whoa.
because you keep changing them, he says. But I
You're
didn't
changing that
change.
particular character, Roach, which we're going to hear about in a second. You were changing him too much, or he was inconsistent?
So no, so Roach was in the very first, very early version that I wrote. He was like in my draft zero, he was an adult, and then but Oak thought my son's called
Ah.
Oak. Oak thought that it was a different character entirely. He thought it was kind of like a Jacob Kowalski type character from Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and he was a big Harry Potter nerd when he was younger, so he was really enthusiastic about that. And then when he read a later version, he was like, "This isn't the character I remembered." Um, and bless him, he misremembered. But my children are fabulous. They're really good at listening to me, and they're very, very good at keeping me grounded um, by
Hmm.
telling me how rubbish I am.
Hmm.
So,
You wait until they come to a point where they say, I'm not your free sensitivity reader anymore. I want to get paid.
yeah.
Maybe they already are at that
Well,
stage.
they don't read for me at all. So my children are they're quite old now. So my youngest is 17, and my eldest daughter doesn't live at home anymore. She's lives with her boyfriend. She's 23, and then my youngest daughter, she's off to university in September, studying game design, which is pretty
Mm.
awesome. So
So now you're outsourcing this to other people, but basically you have a whole roster of people who check that.
yeah,
But I'm
and
assuming that you have a good sense of, you know, well, having raised these three kids and working in those environments, um, having a good sense of where to go with those books. What I find interesting always, when quote unquote heavy themes of the excerpt that we heard. I mean, Paisley, right in the beginning, she's 14, and she's basically been diagnosed, quote unquote, with her early demise. She has
yeah, so
one
she
year
has
to
to
live. It's like you have a
contemplate
terminal.
her own
Yeah.
mortality. And I remember as a child, that was something that I was quite aware of. I was really really scared of the concept of death and what death meant. And it was, it's I find it quite an interesting concept to talk about because it's something that happens to all of us. There are not many things in this world that all of us experience. Every single one
Well,
of us
absolutely,
have.
but it seems that it's still kind of a fairly new, I mean, not new, but I remember, I mean, I'm 52, and I remember there was not a lot of books when I grew up, young adult books, Jugendliteratur, as they call it in Germany, that dealt with death, frankly. Maybe somebody in
Mm,
the chat wants to confirm or challenge me on that. The main books around my time, they didn't deal with those heavy duty subjects, and also then the mother dies in your book. I mean, let's not go into the detail. We don't want to spoil, but she's gone at one point.
yeah. I mean, I remember, so I read predominantly children's literature.
Hmm.
Um, I don't particularly enjoy reading adult literature unless it's science fiction or fantasy or some kind of speculative fiction, because I find the adult fiction that I have that I have access, that I have read, is quite inward looking.
Hmm.
It's very egocentric. It's very me driven. Oh, look at these things that are affecting me directly, and there's very little outward looking themes or you know, whereas children's literature, it's all about having that introspection, having that internal conversation and dialogue, but also having this external dialogue, this external thing that has real impetus within the world that it's set. Children make a difference. Their characters have impact on their environment and their surroundings. And I feel that children, there is they need to feel empowered, and through literature and through writing their own works. Whenever I go to a school and give a talk, I always say to them that there's not many things that they have autonomy over. There's not much that they have complete control over in their lives, especially within their daily school structure. But when they are writing, they are in charge.
Mm.
They're in charge of everything that happens on that page. Um, they are God on the page.
When you go to schools, you read, and then you also try to um, kind of promote writing for the kids to express themselves that way.
Definitely, and
Mm.
writing was from an angle of joy, 'cause, um, the way that the British school system works at the moment is there's an awful lot of importance given to the minutiae of writing, to the structure of language, to using language as um, conveying messages, but not necessarily meaning. And so I try to get get children to connect to the joy of writing, get them to connect to the power that it gives them, get them to connect to the things that are exciting, the things that excite them when they read, the things that
Yeah.
excite them when they explore the world, the things that they want to learn more about, the things that they already know about. Um, one of the saddest things that happened to me when I was at a school visit was a little boy came up to me and he said, "Did anybody ever stop you from being a writer?" And I said to him, "Well, nobody ever stopped me apart from myself, you know. I had to I had to give myself permission to write, and
Yep.
I had to believe in myself." There's a lot.
Believe and overcome the fear that you're not good
Yeah,
enough,
the
that
imposter
you.
syndrome, all of those things,
Mhm,
still
mhm.
struggle with that.
That
Um,
is the biggest struggle. The biggest struggle is always with yourself.
indeed,
Yeah.
indeed, and I think, we put a lot of importance in ourselves, but so I said to him, "Why is somebody stopping you from writing?" And he kind of looked at me and shrugged his shoulders and said, "Well, it's not a very good career option, is it?" Um, so I said to him, "Well, I'm doing okay out of it, and if you need permission to become a writer, then I'm giving you that permission." And I said to him, "For many years, I was a writer and other things. You are allowed to do that. You can be a writer and you can be a librarian. You can be a writer and
Ah,
be an astronomer. You can be a writer and do all of these other things." Um, And I think it's just allowing
You are
people.
such a good person. You know what I would have asked the boys? Like, you give me the phone number of your parents so I can yell at them about the keeping you, giving you like regimenting you to some career that you don't want and telling you, no, boy, you're not gonna write.
I think so. I think we all, we all do things that we don't necessarily want to do in terms of careers at some point. I remember when I was at college, I worked at B&Q because my mum and dad basically got me an application form during the summer and was like, "You need a job, go and get one." Um, but you know, memorizing the barcode for a 150-litre compost wasn't exactly my favourite thing to do, but I did it. Um, but I think it's just knowing that you have options, and we are very privileged to have options,
Yeah.
and to know that even if there are other things that we have to do, there are things that we can choose, things that we want to do, that we are capable of doing. And
Well,
sometimes
yeah.
that means, you know, carving out bits of time. So when I used to work as a librarian, I worked 5 days a week. I travelled to work on the train every day. So I had a half an hour train journey. And during those 30 minutes, I would write. And on the 30-minute journey on the way back home, I would write. And during my lunch hour, I'd have my lunch and then I'd write. So I squeezed things in, squeezed in bits of time, and there were times um, when I probably should have spent more time with my family, but instead I decided that I was going to write, and I always thought it was really important for my children to see me doing that, to see me writing, to see me following my passion and the thing that I love. And my other half, he's a photographer. So they grew up seeing Jason doing his photography as well. Um, and they've grown up to be quite artistic people. Our eldest daughter, she's a seamstress. She
Mhm.
works making clothes, and she's a self-taught seamstress because we homeschooled our children. So everything that she learned from books and from watching YouTube videos and from trial and error through I remember so I remember, when she was a teenager, so she dresses in the 1940s style, my daughter. She's very elegant
Oh, yeah, this
and
is interesting. There's a whole
yeah.
group of people that meet and they kind of role play that era.
It's wonderful, and she goes to lots of tea dances and things. She was at one yesterday, actually. But, I remember she wanted to make herself a bullet bra, and she spent a year and a half learning, making and failing until she, made the right one, one that was perfect, and I think it's that determination that you don't want to give up on the things that are really important to you, your goals, your dreams, and even if other things happen, life is always happening, um, but you need to hold on to the things that are really important to you,
Yeah.
and if they are important, you will find a way.
Very well said. Of course, we do need to stress, like you said, there are people who are privileged and there are people who don't have these options, and we're not talking about people who are struggling to make ends meet, to just sit there, relax, and meditate, and then find what their passion is when there is no roof over people's heads.
Indeed.
Um, I wanted to briefly mention here our one of our regular viewers, Kitten Duo on YouTube. Kitten, thank you so much for your support. And she says she needs to go. She's not feeling good. Kitten, we really appreciate your support for the show. And she's not in world. She's watching on YouTube. So I hope that Kitten gets better. Now, oh boy,
You'll feel better soon.
this is an amazing conversation. And the time is running. I want to pick up a few chat questions because we're saying that these heavy duty subject matters are not present in children's literature.
Yeah, I know in the chat somebody mentioned the bridge to
D- d-
Terabithia, and, oh, that's just
and also Judy said
such a beautiful
Bambi.
story.
Bambi did lose her mother. That's a that's a nice Charlotte's Web, yeah, and I want to make clear there's actually a German author, Peter Hertling, and there's a bunch of others that were around, and Peter Hertling Hirbel was a book, and I have to look up if it was translated, but that was about a disabled boy, and he was very much focused on topics that nobody else would touch. There's also kind of a love story between um, teenagers, and one was an immigrant, and that was back in the late 70s, early 80s. He was huge, and he still is alive. Peter Hertling. If somebody from the team can look him up and put that in the local chat, please. The Red Pony, the Yearling, Bridge to Terabithia. Yeah. So.
There is a beautiful, beautiful book that deals with death. It's quite a modern children's book. It's called A Monster Calls, and I remember we had an adult reading group at our library, and I got them to read A Monster Calls, and I didn't tell them it was a children's book, and because I knew that they would have opinions about children's books, because adults sometimes do, and they all came back and they were all pretty floored by it, as I was when I first read it. I don't want to give too much away just in case people haven't read it and they want to go away and experience it. But I always say it is the book that broke me as a person and then
Mm,
built me up as a much better one. Um, and I remember getting near to the end of the book, and I was sitting in bed reading, and I just had to close the book and put it a safe distance away from myself, and then cry my eyes out
mm.
before I could then pick the book up and read it again. And it's just such a powerful, beautiful, harrowing story.
Can you put
Uh,
the name of the author? Oh, somebody found it.
yeah.
Uh, which book are we talking about now?
So it's called A Monster Calls by Patrick
A
Ness.
Monster Cause. Okay,
Yeah.
let me
So
have somebody bring
they
that up.
made a really good it's one of the best adaptations I've ever seen as a movie, actually, one of the truest adaptations. And I think it's because they really stuck with the theme of the book and the tone of the book. But obviously we all know that books are infinitely better than movies. But I
Oh,
remember
thank you for saying that. Usually I say this every week. Now, finally, I don't have to, because yes, it's restrictive to our imagination.
Oh, and it's
It
just
yeah,
such a richer experience when you are immersed in a book and you are reading and you are in that world, and it becomes you become part of it, and it becomes a little bit of your life and a little bit of experience that you have vicariously had.
right.
Um, but yeah, I remember watching the movie with my children, and we were watching it in the dark. It was during winter. We had all of the lights off, and it got near to the end, and all I could hear was because everybody was just crying their eyes out. And put the
Mhm,
lights on, and both my teenage daughters had mascara run faces, and were like, "Don't ever do that to us again."
mhm.
We weren't prepared. We weren't prepared. Um, yeah.
There's two links to two German authors. They're actually in English, from English Wikipedia, Peter Hertling and Gudrun Pausemang. Those are two really good older German authors that have created works that I think are standards. And if folks are interested, look it up and find a translation. This is young adult stuff that is dealing with nuclear war, disability, death in the family, disease, and in a very, very life affirming, inspiring way. Now, oh boy, we only have 20 minutes left in the program. We got to read. People are so interested about the Roach character.
Ah,
So
so
now
I
yeah,
love
this excerpt
Roach.
is the Roach.
Yeah.
Roach. Yes, yes, yes.
So I'll give you a little bit of background information about Roach. Um, so Roach is he is a lensing character. So I have two lensing characters in the book, and they're
Lens.
lensing characters because it's a third person narration, but we get a close third through Paisley,
Hmm.
our main protagonist, and then Roach, who is like an anti-protagonist.
Hmm.
Let me. I've just got to stand up. Hang on a sec. Here we go, as if
Yeah,
by
you just have to
magic.
spend it. You don't, yeah, exactly. And now the book stand will magically move as if moved by dragon touch in a way. Oops, too close. Here we
Oh,
go.
I won't be able to see the text. There we go. Okay. So again, this is from the beginning of the book, and it gives us a little bit of an introduction to Roach's character. So as I read to you from the first bit from the first chapter, Paisley has received her stars, and along with the star tattoo that she received, she also had her scroll. Um, she then goes out into the streets of lower London, not the
Hmm.
floating boroughs, and she her destiny scroll is taken from her, but she is unaware of that at the time. So I shall read from that moment onwards. As Paisley began to think more clearly and set her course home, the boy who had stolen her fate began to sink deeper towards what he knew was his own destiny. He moved through the back streets of the city, in the places where only the rats and wrongdoers dwelled. He paused for a moment to look at Paisley's chart, lifting his own star-covered wrist to the parchment. His stars were scattered across his olive skin, covering the circular tattoo in small groups and pairings. He had never seen stars like the ones on Paisley's chart before, bunched in one half and tightly packed. He guessed that that was why she was so important to his mistress. He certainly hadn't seen anything else that marked her out as special. He scanned the old Celtic script. He'd never fully learned the old language, but knew enough for Paisley's fate to make sense to him. The girl wasn't going to live past the turning. He rolled the parchment and placed it in his inside pocket, then pulled out his electrical torch before making his way into the sewer tunnels. He took long, sure strides as he walked away from the heart of the city, his neckerchief pulled over his nose, the stench of the sloshing water around him slowly fading as he turned away from the channels that led to the frozen Thames. The opening was hard to see in the gloom from the torch, but he knew where the keyhole was and the right way to turn it. The tunnels became wider, the air cleaner, and the brickwork more elaborate. After a while, a series of electrical lights told him that he was close. He pocketed his torch and stepped into the wide cavernous space. The 8 ornately laid walls of the subterranean hall all met in a point which hovered above its centre. The twisting pillars of brickwork converged to then push down and form the head of a dragon, open-mouthed and expectant. Raised up on an octagonal platform below the gaping jaws was a Nightsilver throne, cast in ink-black metal around the white teeth of a great dragon. On it sat a beautiful little girl. She looked no older than 10, but the boy knew that she was as old as the teeth in the throne that she sat on. She was dressed in a midnight taffeta coat and dragon-hide trousers. Her hair was as long and flowing as the dark waters of the tunnels. "Do you have it, Roach?" she called to him, her voice bouncing off the walls. Roach pulled Paisley's destiny from his jacket pocket and walked towards the throne. He clenched his jaw as he bowed his head and handed over the rolled up paper. The girl reached out and snatched it from him with small, delicate pink fingers. "Did she see you?" Roach shook his head. "I don't think so." The blow came from nowhere. He put his head pushed to the side, his lip bleeding. He didn't know if she had kicked or punched him. All he knew was that the dark dragon was not to be underestimated. She might look like a sweet little girl, but she was anything but. "You don't think so?" Roach narrowed his dark eyes and rubbed his aching jaw. "No, she didn't. I'm sure of it." "Good." The dark dragon sat back on her throne and unrolled Paisley's scroll. She greedily read the old Celtic script. Roach watched as her small shoulders relaxed and her lips curled into a cruel smile. He knew what the scroll said and what the dark dragon was worried about. And Paisley's stars was going to stop her. But the girl's track did not bend that way, and Roach was glad for many reasons. "Excellent," The dark dragon said, "The stars are in my favor."
Ooh, and that's the Nightsilver Promise by our guest Annaliese Avery here on the Second Life Book Club. Roach is well, he's a young fella that is kind of on the dark side, and we hope that he may change his ways and come over to the good side. But this is so amazing. So there's underground, there's above ground, and there's hovering above. And as I'm panning back here, my view here, because earlier you were saying that the world is functioning like clockwork. Your world, I'm actually looking at the ceiling here of our building that we're in, and there seems to be a clockwork there in the ceiling. Anyways, um, wonderful reading. Thank you. We
Yeah, I
are,
noticed that there's quite a
yeah,
few things that we haven't touched on. So we haven't talked about Nightsilver. We haven't obviously talked about the Dark Dragon, who is the main antagonist in each of the books. We haven't talked about dragon walkers. Um, there's so
newsflash,
much
Annalise. People need to read this
they
book, and
do.
we cannot touch absolutely everything. It is impossible, nearly impossible, because we also
We'd,
want to
we'd
know
need
about
another
the.
3 book clubs to
Yeah,
just scratch the surface. But one of the things that the Night Silver, so from the actual title of the book, The Night Silver Promise.
yeah. Where does
Um,
that title come from? What is a night silver?
so Night Silver is a metal within the world. And we have alchemiths. So alchemiths are metal workers who use alchemy to create night silver. Night silver is a bonded metal, and it is bonded to a host. Um, the blood of a host is entangled into the smelting process when the metal is made, and I'm so with entanglement, you can know something about one particle by registering something in another particle.
Hmm.
So I thought that that was really interesting, and just the idea that by entangling a person to a metal, you can know things about the person by observing the metal. So if a night silver object is warm and vibrant, then we know that the host, the person who it is bonded to, is alive.
Hmm.
It also takes on some of the more subtler characteristics of the person. But if the night silver is cold and brittle and easily broken, then we know that the person is dead. Um, and that
Hmm.
becomes very important in the story.
This
When
is like quantum entanglement, um,
indeed, yeah.
and the dragons. You wanted to, okay, tell us a little bit about the dragon walkers then.
Okay, so again, we were talking earlier about the different world mythologies that there are. We spoke about the idea of the celestial mechanism, and that the chief designer created the celestial mechanism using the breath of the great dragons. And the dragon walkers are women that have dragon touch,
Hmm.
and they walk the way of Anu, so they follow the way of the dragon. And um, because they're not allowed to set foot in Albion, they have created these amazing floating burrows that they live on. Because I thought, right, if dragons are capable of creating a whole entire universe, surely dragon walkers are capable of amazing feats of engineering.
Okay, but the dragon walkers, and they secure the dragon vault and stuff like that, and
They do, because dragons love gold.
right.
They love
Oh,
treasure, you know,
I never knew that.
historically. They
I
just
thought
they
there's
are,
something like called Lord of the Rings or something where that
yeah,
is
the
happening, or
Smaug,
yeah.
yeah.
But wait a minute. So they're also they're kind of loyal, but then they're also a little bit disloyal. But wait a minute. Earlier you said, now we're in the weeds. You said that it's illegal to have the dragon touch, but the dragon walkers are then exempt from that.
So because the dragon so there are always loopholes, Drax. Um,
I'm gonna become one of those super fans who's gonna email you every day. Wait a minute,
oh, I love
but
it. Yes,
in your
do.
world building, I found a hole in there.
So again, so they are outlawed from the Empire of Albion. There are places that they are allowed to be, and they are welcomed, but within the Empire of Albion, they are not allowed. And so, in order to operate within the constructs of society, they have created these floating boroughs, and they look after the financial well-being of most of the population.
Mm,
Because I thought, what better than monastic bankers to look after people's money? And so they're a bit like warrior monks that also
mhm,
like commerce.
mhm.
Um, so they have these
A little
dragon
bit of
troves.
mercenaries too, maybe, kinda.
Maybe, I think
We don't know their
again,
loyalty, but their loyalty is a little fishy.
they have loyalty to each other. They have loyalty
I
to
see.
Anu, to the great dragon.
The great dragon.
Um,
Mm,
and they definitely look out for each other and for themselves. But again, it's the idea of control, isn't it? So the the empire controls them by not allowing them to be a functioning part of their society, and then in
yeah,
return they control the financial institutions, which have an awful lot of power and have an awful lot of control. So I just thought that was a really interesting.
and I
uh,
just and I just wanted to spoil something, but I'm not gonna do it. Okay, we're running up against the clock, Annalise, and we have a segment here that we call Back to School. And we do want to do this segment. And here's this is how it goes. So you're going to pretend you're a writing teacher, um, or or
okay.
former librarian, now sort of, a monk. Of writing, and your disciples, they come to you to find answers to their questions. So if I can ask our wonderful Ruby to bring up the backdrop, the back to school backdrop, and then as soon as it's up, we will have you. We will have you. Here we go. Here's the backdrop. Now please. Oh wow! Look at Annalise is so fast. She's already sitting. She really wants to assume
Like
her.
lightning. Just
Yeah, you've been waited for this promotion, becoming the head teacher of this writing school, and and Ruby, our little wonderful dragon here, she just fell asleep, but now she woke up, and I think Ruby maybe has a question. Ruby, do you want to ask it? Please go right ahead. Oh, wait a minute, Ruby, we can't hear you. I forgot about that. We can't hear you on um the YouTube chat. Give me 1 second here, and you have to call in with us for the YouTube chat. But basically, um, here's Ruby, the information for us to call in your chat. And we have a minute before Ruby calls in. Annalise, have you ever contemplated becoming a teacher, a writing teacher? You
I
feel
I
qualified?
I have taught writing before,
Oh,
yes. So
in what capacity? Where? How
so
was?
I taught writing as part of the Golden Egg Academy. I was a children's book editor and program leader for them for a little while. So
Oh, then you are completely qualified to play our little game.
I'm looking forward to it.
Now Ruby's going to ask her question in chat. We just found out. And were you talking? Were you teaching first time writers? Was there any? What was your job to narrow it down a little bit more?
Yeah, so for those of you who are interested in writing for children and young adults, definitely check out the Golden Egg Academy. They're a
Uh,
wonderful organisation, and they have lots of different um, schemes of tuition where they basically give you all of the fundamentals, all of the building blocks, all of the keys that you need in order to progress and learn the craft of writing for children. And I did my master's in writing for adults and screenwriting, and writing for children is there is some marked differences. You have to hold their attention a little bit more
Mhm,
keenly. The
mhm.
adults will give you, you know, the benefit of the doubt, whereas children, you do need to hold their attention and to, do everything on
Oh,
a deeper level, really, and a bit faster.
I just noticed that, Shala put and Monkey put the, link to Golden Egg Academy here in the chat. Golden Egg Society, I'm sorry. Or Golden Egg Academy or Society or both. So people can check that out. And did Ruby have a question here
Yeah, so she
for
says,
Q3?
"What happens if you get ideas down the line, at later books
Ooh,
that may conflict with the internal work? Do you have
with
an
the initial
overall"
work.
yeah, sorry, the initial work. Do you have, an overall idea of what can and cannot happen or can be changed?
And this is specific world building with unexpected trilogies, meaning you may have started, like you're saying early, you have an initial idea, this may be one book, and then you kind of expand it.
Yeah. So I think so there's a couple of things. Number one is making sure that you factor in a little bit of wiggle room within your world building. Um I like to think that so you only need to really world build as far as the page or maybe one step beyond it. And you can keep going with the reader. So, for example, when we homeschooled our children, I always thought that actually I only ever have to stay one step ahead of my eldest child in all areas of learning, um, because the others will follow along. And it's kind of the same with your world
Mm,
building. Although there are some things that you may know that are canon that you don't tell the reader. They form part of the iceberg of the world, the bits that you know that you don't ever show, the bits that are below the waterline. The bits that you do show are the bits that you keep a pace with the reader. So as long as you're adding something that doesn't contradict canon, it can contradict ideas that are held by other characters. It can contradict things that people believe are true but don't have any kind of basis, fundamental basis to prove that that is true.
mhm.
But you need to make sure that everything that you do is true to the world that you are creating on a fundamental level.
But
So
then you
as
have to have like your little world Bible. I mean, you have to have that
yeah, so I
anyway.
have a book Bible for the Nightsilver Promise, and there are many things in the book Bible that we don't talk about in the book, but I know they're there, like, and they're there for people that I work on the book with. So with my editors, they all have access to the book Bible, and I update it quite regularly. So there's little videos on Einstein Rosen bridges. There's little videos on Dyson spheres. There's links to information about entanglement. There's links to information about how I built the world and what I believe the physical concepts are
Mhm.
around certain things. But they're things that we never get into in the book. We never really delve into them fully, but they're there if a reader wants to scratch below the surface and find out about them.
Wow. This is a very good question. So it's really, I mean, then you can expand it if you start with this concept, then you can expand it the world probably at infinitum, unless you do have some sort of ending at some point.
Yeah, I mean, you don't ever want to do a kind of, you know, dynasty thing where you realise that 4 books down the road you've kind of made this massive monster for yourself and all of a sudden it was a dream and we've gone back to book 2. Um,
Ooh, that's what when I used to, I mean, I stopped watching television a long time ago. People know that story. The last big show that I enjoyed was Lost, and I actually found the ending amazing, but people were pretty pissed off that it was suggested that they all just died. If people don't know what I'm talking about, uh, Lost is worth, I think it's a great
it's a
show, and I
it was a
actually
great show. I loved
Actually,
Lost.
I thought the ending was absolutely not a cop out, but a lot of little nerds were like, "Wait a minute! In episode 4, you did is exactly sort of that kind of interesting phenomenon." And I don't wanna lampoon them or make fun of them. I understand a lot of people felt betrayed by this ending. Yeah.
And I think that So reader trust is a really important thing, and when you're creating your world, making sure that you've factored in, if you know that you're going to expand it, that you have factored in those areas of grayness that you haven't, fully fundamentally developed the canon on, but you know that there's going to be some wiggle room there. But I always think that there is an unwritten contract that you enter into
Hmm.
as a reader with an author of a book, and the contract goes a little bit like this. As an author, I say to my reader, um, come with me on an adventure, and I'm going to tell you a couple of things that are true, and I'm going to show you a couple of things that aren't true, and we're going to have a great time on this adventure. And at the end of it, I'm going to give you a gift. The gift is the ending, and the
Hmm.
ending will deliver, and you will find that the fundamental truths of the book have been fulfilled in the ending. You might be very grumpy with the ending because you want to read book 2 immediately, and you might have to wait a year for it. But that's the contract that you get into with a reader. You you make promises to them, and you better deliver. Otherwise, especially children, if you do not deliver on the promises that you make in the
But
beginning of
Annalise,
your
what
book.
about but I just noticed I'm sitting here behind. People don't see me. I'm this disembodied voice. Let me address you here directly by going forward. But Annalise, what about the contract that you, as an artiste, make with yourself, saying you follow me on this journey, and you have to accept that the artistic integrity that I have to the work that I started may alienate you.
So I have a little bit of a different contract that I have with myself, and the contract that I have with myself is that um, I will find joy in what I write, and I will find promise, and I will find something that I find interesting or exciting in the
Hmm.
work that I am creating. And fundamentally, at the end of the day, I will feel that what I have created is worthy. And if at any point I don't feel those things, especially the joy is really important because you are writing a book for an awfully long time. And after you've written that book, you will talk about it to lots and lots of people.
Right.
You will experience it in lots of different ways. So you need to make sure that you enjoy what you're writing. You enjoy that, not just the experience of writing, but also the thing that you are creating. And I remember after I'd
But look, but
finished.
that's why I'm saying I'm sorry to step in here,
Okay.
but this may be incompatible with your audience. That kind of joy.
Yes, it is. And then that's the difference between being a writer and being an author. So you can write all day long for your own personal joy, but it might not ever find an audience. And that depends what you're writing for. Are you writing in order to please an audience, or are you writing in order to please yourself? I feel that if you are writing for your own personal ultimate joy, you are writing something that is worthy, and you are prepared to learn your craft and to write something that is um, is deemed by the gatekeepers to have been written to a standard in which it can be published, then I don't see why you can't find an audience, why you
Hmm.
can't write something that gives you joy and is well written and will find an audience.
I have an answer for that, but that's another 2 hours discussion. I feel we're just getting started. This is really fascinating. And I tweeted something controversial this morning, said art is not entertainment and entertainment is not art, just to provoke a little bit because that's what the so-called social media is for, I guess. I read that in some sort of crash course on how to use social media. But anyways, I digress. I feel there is a way to um, we're certainly not talking about children's books now, but I do feel, I mean, this is also a personal preference of mine, is I want to be challenged, right? So when I read something, and people know this, I love to read maximalist novels. I love David Foster Wallace and some of the newer ones. I'm starting on Remembrance of Times Past by Marcel Proust. This is stuff that most people deem painful because it takes a lot of work. But just like with music, I like to be challenged. I'm not trying to
Mm.
say to other people who want a little bit escapism and want a nice
No, but I think
thriller.
from the
From
challenge you gain joy.
Oh, absolutely, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly is what
So
I'm saying. But I feel sometimes discriminated against when people say, "Oh, Drax is such an elitist. He's looking down on me because I read Robert Ludlum and whatever the other guy's name is." um, the guy who wrote uh, Jesus Christ, the Illuminati thing. Dan Brown.
oh, Dan Brown. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyways, you see what I'm saying? Like this, Dan Brown, Jessica says it. It gives me joy to go deep into these literary maximalist novels, and that's how I find joy because
Yeah.
they're challenging, and I'm not expecting to understand everything. You know.
And that's great. And I think that we should all read for pleasure. We should all read because it brings us joy. Um, and it would be very, very boring if we all read the same books and found the same joy in them. Um, that's why there are so many books out there, because we all have different tastes and we all have things that delight us and inspire us and that we find interesting. Um, so I mean, if you read my book and you don't spark with it, that's fine, because there's going to be another book out there that you're going to love and enjoy.
Mhm.
Especially with young readers, sometimes young readers say, "Oh, I don't like reading," and I say to them, "Well, what have you read?" And they tell me, and then I usually talk to them about how they access stories in other ways, because lots of children access stories through film and
Mhm.
television, and I can usually find a book in that kind of genre that I think that they would like. And sometimes it's like my youngest daughter, we used to say that she was allergic to reading because it would bring her out and hides. She would run and hide. But she absolutely
Oh,
adored manga and comics. And so she read predominantly manga and comic books. And then now that she's older, out of all my children, she is now the biggest reader. She reads more than the other two do,
oh,
even though
this is very good that you bring. This is so important that you bring this up, and I also want to clarify. This is something where I also feel very strongly about. Your example of your daughter is a prime example of getting somebody to read first and enjoy the act of reading, and not be obsessed with the quality of the material. I'm not making a statement on manga, yes or no, or good or bad or whatever, but I'm saying this is something that unfortunately it seems to me that a lot of teachers in the system are still somewhat obsessed about. They say, well, this is not worthy, this is not good. And then they start kids, in my mind, in a very age inappropriate way with material that is, to me, wonderful. But for them, it is in fact too challenging if it's, you know, uh, let's say antiquated language, perhaps. And that to me is interesting because a lot of the stuff in the German school system, at least, I think is not age appropriate because it will turn people off. And it seems to me like some sort of test if you kind of survive reading this stuff, Gottfried Keller, which is amazing. But for a ninth grader, this is painful to read this kind of stuff. And it's almost like, okay, if you got through this, then you're worthy of continuing on this sort of higher track in our classist education system. Anyways, my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, it also works the other way. My eldest daughter, she had a much higher reading age than her actual age, so it became slightly challenging to find things that were, uh, you know, dealing with themes that were okay for her to read, but were also challenging her with her reading. And I know that personally, as a child, I didn't really like reading fiction until I was in high school.
Hmm.
Before then, I read lots of non-fiction. There's a little joke in our family about the fact that I read the whole encyclopedia, all 22 volumes of it. Um, But
Yeah, this yeah, yeah.
I really liked non-fiction. I just liked absorbing facts. And it wasn't until I had an English teacher who gave me The Hobbit to read.
Mm,
Um, and I was like, hang on a minute, what is this brave new world with such hobbits in it? And then I was hooked. But it just takes that entry book, and also
exactly.
it takes you being able to read whatever excites you, whatever interests you, whatever brings you joy, whatever keeps you reading, whatever captivates your imagination, and whatever then leads you on to new ideas. And I think that's what we're all searching for in books is something new, something fresh, but also a little glimpse of ourselves. We want to see ourselves reflected. Um,
Very well said. The entry book is also, I mean, this brings us back to the librarian, or just to have someone, some sort of mentor, or a teacher that is in tune with that particular child, and finds or has the time to kind of find something for that child, and take every
yeah.
child, and not just,
And also
you know.
having reading role models. So seeing other adults read is really, really important.
I
So
think that's
my
why my son stopped reading temporarily. We read a lot. He's in a well, he's 18, he has other interests right now. I'm completely
yeah,
fine with that. We read all the time. And I think in his case, his mother and I were constantly with a book in front of our nose. He goes like, "Oh my God, I don't want to be like my
yeah.
parents."
Whereas my parents never were like that, but my Auntie Jane and my Uncle Colin, they were quite a bit younger than my mother, and they're her siblings, and they lived at home with my nana granddad, and I spent a lot of time with my nana granddad. Um, and they were big readers, lots of fantasy adventure books.
Hmm.
So I had positive adult role models who were actively reading. And although that wasn't necessarily at home, it was still people that I had access to. And I think that's really important for children to see adults reading.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Alice, I feel really bad at cutting off this conversation, but we do have to wrap it in the
I've had a
interest
lovely
of
evening.
time.
Thank you so much
Oh,
for
Annalise,
having me.
thank you. And look, Ruby is standing up. The dragon is standing up with the dunce cap, and I think clapping. It's just wonderfully inspiring conversation. The book is wonderful. It is extremely epic. Um, get that book, get the other one, and then harass Annalise to put pedal to the metal on the third one. I recommend.
Yeah. So I'm writing a third book at the moment, but
Oh,
it's not the third book in the
you're not
trilogy. So
ready to complete it now. That's fine. Uh, Ruby, if I can ask you to put down the writing school set, and we're gonna wrap with the credits. Although I do have to mention the one little the beef that I have with Anna. These people I think can
oh
guess what it
yes.
is. Shyla prepared a slide for us, so let's go back to the main backdrop, please. Thank you, Ruby, and we can sit back on our chairs here for a minute. Um, and this is, this is obviously a joke, but one of the main protagonists here, I'm going to read you this excerpt. I promised my service to you alone, Master Dax, not to your sister or friend, Odelia said, flicking a few switches and bathing the interior of the pod in harsh electrical light. Why is the protagonist called Dax? Okay,
I think it's just
bad
a
joke.
typo. Like it's literally a typo.
Exactly. There's an R missing. Next time I want to hear Drax. But very briefly, because that oh God, there's so many questions, but I do find it fascinating how people find names. In 45 seconds or less, what is your process in finding interesting names?
So I'm really, really lucky that most of the characters in the Nightsilver Promise turned up with their names fully attached to them. Paisley, she already had her name. Dax already had his name. Roach had his name. Corbett, again, Corbett Grubbings, which is a fabulous name.
Yeah,
He turned up.
absolutely. Yeah.
Um, Odelia, she turned up with her name as well. I haven't been so successful in the book that I'm writing at the moment. I went through many names for my main character, but
But what do you mean they turned up? They just popped into your head like that?
yeah, so usually I'm really, really lucky with characters. They turn up quite fully formed. It's almost like they walk onto the page and just say, "Hello,
Mhm.
are you going to write about me now?" Um, and so with the some so with the new book that I'm writing, I had my main character and she just wasn't working. I wasn't working, and I realized it was because I kept calling to her and the name was not right, and she was like, I don't know who you're talking to, but it's not me. um and so about a week ago, I realized what her name was. And today she started talking to me. It sounds absolutely bonkers. I spoke to my other half about it. He was in the garden this morning, and I was like, yeah, she's just started talking to me. So I'm just going to go and do some writing down in the summer house. And he was like, are you all right? Do you need a lie down? Because you sound pretty bonkers. Um,
That's what
but
happened with me with music, but that's people accept that more that music speaks to you. If non-existing people speak to you in your head, that's usually a sign maybe for psychiatric intervention. That is correct.
yeah, I think it's okay, if they're characters and you're talking to other writers, when you're talking to people who have never experienced that, have never, had that in their own, because I my imagination is quite vivid and quite cinematic. Um, other people who don't the way my youngest daughter, she's one of those people who can't imagine things, which is
Mhm.
quite I find quite amazing, especially as she's a really, really good artist. But she has to write a list of all of the things that she wants to put into her drawings, because she cannot actually visualize it, which I find quite mind blowing. Um, but yeah, my characters, I've always been really, really lucky. And I do have a page in my writer's journal. I'm a big journaler. I like to keep a bullet journal type writing journal. And I do have a page in each of my journals of interesting names, and I collect them and I stick them in a list form of just fun, interesting names. And sometimes I'll look
Mm.
at a name and go, "Yep, that's that's a person. I know that they're going to do something." And sometimes the names get crossed off. Um, so yeah, I magpie as I go around.
And keep it all in one notebook or list. Tell your daughter lists are awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
now thank you, Annalise. Thank you, audience. It was a wonderful conversation. We could easily extend this to a 3-hour program, and people know it. It's always the same. Now, if you want to support this show, please head over to YouTube, like and subscribe this video and other videos on YouTube. Consider becoming a member. There's membership levels on YouTube that helps the show. Please tip the tip jar. The tip jar is for our volunteers. This is a complete volunteer effort here. Shyla the Super Gecko, Isabel Sharon, Ruby Geek, and Monkey are part of the core team here, and we get a lot of help from other content creators. I'm not going to go through the credit slides because we're out of time. But any contribution in the tip jar helps. I know you got some linden dollars from sitting under a linden tree. You got them down there in your pocket. So put it out there. Now next week we have another what we call free for all, and after that, we have Mike Watson talk about the memeing of Mark Fisher. It's a political show. He's a sociologist from the UK, and he's talking about the culture wars. And it's a very interesting book about the Frankfurt School, Adorno. So get your Adorno knowledge ready. But that's in 2 weeks. Next week is the free for all, Wednesday, 12 o'clock, Second Lifetime, and we do not need a theme. Anybody can come if you want to read from your favorite book a little excerpt, or if you're a writer, you want to read a little bit, work in progress. Please just message me before so I can kind of map out the hour. But I thought I'm just going to throw a theme out there. I would like to talk a little bit about reading in the time of war. Now, there's a lot of wars going on, and there's always war, but of course, the war that is currently in the news, which upsets me a little bit because there are other longstanding conflicts that people tend to ignore. But uh, Putin's invasion of Ukraine is, of course, the war that gets most of the airtime, and we talked about it a little bit. A lot of people tune this stuff out. A lot of people want to engage with the country and the culture more, especially when something like this happens. So, reading in the time of war, that would really interest me next week if people want to share what is there a specific reading that they do when these conflicts are um, all-consuming the daily news cycle. Do they escape? Do they further engage, or what do they do? Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I do want to shout out to Claude, who mentioned Robert Anton Wilson about the Illuminati, because the Illuminati trilogy is one of my favorite books. Uh, and Stella said she was reading Crime and Punishment as a teenager. Now that's quite something. But anyway, thank you guys. Thank you, Annalise. And we'll see you all next week, right here. Well, not here in the steampunk venue, maybe somewhere else. We'll see. Because this is Annalise's place and she can lock the doors. We'll
I'm
see you
living here
next week.
now.
She
That's
lives
it.
here.
I've moved in.
There's no roller rink, we might have to
It's
attach
okay.
someone.
Clear out the chairs. I can skate round. It's
She's
fine.
pulling out the chairs. She's remodeling. All right, everyone, bye bye. Next week, same time, same world. Bye bye.